Confess that the child belongs to another man, and I may spare you prison."
The Duke of Blackmere placed the paper before Eleanor, while two magistrates waited to hear her answer. Her immediate refusal cost her everything. "I will not confess to a lie." The words left her calmly, though the child beneath her heart moved with such force that she pressed one hand against the blue silk stretched over her abdomen. Cedric Blackmere stood on the opposite side of the library table. Once, Eleanor had known every change in his expression: the slight narrowing of his eyes when troubled, the muscle that tightened in his jaw when pride kept him from admitting fear. Tonight, his face revealed nothing. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. Behind him, Lady Viola Harcourt lowered her gaze with practiced sorrow. The Duke's widowed cousin had arrived at Blackmere 6 months earlier with her 8-year-old son, Julian, claiming her late husband's debts had left them destitute. Eleanor had opened the east wing to them. Now Viola wore Eleanor's emerald brooch at her throat. One of the magistrates cleared his throat. "Your Grace, the Duchess is with child. Imprisonment before her confinement would invite public criticism." "The Duchess used charitable visits to conduct an affair," Viola said softly. "The public may feel less sympathy when the letters become known." She placed a bundle of correspondence beside the accusation. Each letter bore Eleanor's name and described secret meetings with Dr. Nathaniel Shaw, the physician who assisted her at the tenants' infirmary. The dates were correct. The places were correct. The words were not. Cedric had refused to show her the letters before summoning the magistrates. He had already dismissed her explanations as the inventions of a cornered woman. Eleanor looked at the confession. If she signed it, Cedric could deny their child's legitimacy and make Julian his presumptive heir. She would be sent away with a small allowance, dependent upon the husband who had branded her an adulteress. If she refused, the forged letters could support charges of fraud and conspiracy, perhaps even an attempt to impose a false heir upon a noble estate. "You knew where I went on those dates," she told Cedric. "You approved the infirmary accounts yourself. I approved medical work. I did not approve midnight meetings with Shaw. Those meetings never occurred. I asked him that question this morning." Eleanor's breath caught. "Where is Dr. Shaw?" Cedric looked toward the fire. "Gone." Viola answered for him. His rooms were empty. A stableman saw him riding south before dawn. Conveniently gone, Eleanor thought, either frightened into flight or prevented from defending her. She picked up the first letter. The handwriting resembled hers, but the strokes were too careful. Whoever had copied it knew the shape of her hand, not its rhythm. Then she read the final paragraph. "I have purchased the pennyroyal as you instructed. Once my condition is concealed, no one shall question our meetings." A cold clarity settled over her. "This is false." Cedric gave a humorless laugh. "You have said so repeatedly. I mean, the forger made a mistake." Eleanor turned the letter toward the magistrates. "I have never stocked pennyroyal at Blackmere. In sufficient quantity, it can cause hemorrhage and death. I forbade its use when I took charge of the dispensary 5 years ago." Viola's fingers tightened around her fan. Cedric noticed Eleanor watching her. For one fleeting second, doubt disturbed his expression. Then wounded pride hardened it again. "The word appears in your own inventory," he said. "An inventory written before our marriage." Silence followed. Someone had searched older household records to construct the letters. Someone with access to locked archives and knowledge of Eleanor's medical work. Cedric could have stopped then. He could have ordered an examination of the ink, questioned the servants, or waited until Shaw was found. Instead, he took the confession from her hands. "You are confined to the West Apartments until your brother's carriage arrives," he declared. Your authority over the household is revoked. Mrs. Finch will be dismissed tonight, and you will have no contact with the tenants, the infirmary, or Dr. Shaw." Mrs. Finch had served Eleanor since she was 16. Punishing the maid was meant to make resistance more painful. "You once said you trusted my judgment above your own," Eleanor whispered. "I once believed the child you carried was mine." The cruelty of it struck more deeply because Cedric spoke without raising his voice. Eleanor removed the Blackmere household keys from her belt and placed them on the table. "When the truth is known, remember that you had a choice tonight." Cedric did not answer. 2 footmen escorted her upstairs. Mrs. Finch was already packing when Eleanor entered the West apartments, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "They gave me 15 minutes, the maid said, but I found this beneath your writing desk." She held up an old dispensary inventory. Several pages had been cut from its center. Before Eleanor could examine it, a guard appeared and ordered Mrs. Finch away. The maid embraced her mistress quickly, pressing something hard into Eleanor's palm. "Wait until you are alone." The door closed behind her. Eleanor opened her hand. A tiny brass key lay against her skin. 3 hours later, after the corridor had fallen silent, the panel beside the fireplace shifted. Mrs. Finch emerged from the servants' passage with mud on her hem. Behind her came Mrs. Wren, the retired parish midwife, clutching a register wrapped in oilcloth. The old woman's face was gray with terror. "They altered more than your letters," she said. "They altered a birth." She laid the register on Eleanor's table and reached for its clasp. Glass shattered. Mrs. Wren jerked backward as a pistol ball tore through the window and buried itself in the wall. The candles went out. In the darkness, Eleanor heard the register strike the floor, and an unseen hand began pulling it through the broken window. Eleanor dropped to her knees and seized the oilcloth before it vanished through the broken window. The unseen thief pulled hard enough to drag her across the carpet. Jagged glass cut through her sleeve, but she twisted the cloth around her wrist and refused to release it. "Mrs. Finch, the bell rope." "No," Mrs. Wren whispered. "The guards may belong to them." A second hand appeared between the broken panes. Eleanor caught the glint of a signet ring before the intruder wrenched the register again. Pain shot through her injured arm. She braced one foot against the wall and pulled with all her strength. The oilcloth tore. Half the register remained in Eleanor's hands. The rest disappeared into the darkness. Boots struck the gravel below. A moment later, a horse galloped toward the eastern woods. Mrs. Finch hurried to the window, but Eleanor dragged her back before another shot could be fired. "Did you see him?" "Only his coat, black, with a silver shoulder cord." Blackmere's senior servants wore silver cords. So did Cedric's personal guard. Mrs. Wren sat heavily beside the hearth. Blood ran across her palm where the torn binding had cut her skin. "They knew I came here," she said. "God forgive me, they have watched me since yesterday." Eleanor relit the nearest candle. The surviving portion contained parish births from 7 years earlier, but most of the pages had been torn diagonally. Names, dates, and signatures ended abruptly at the ragged edge. "Which entry did you mean to show me?" Mrs. Wren turned several fragments with trembling fingers. "The birth of a boy. I attended his mother at a cottage near the northern boundary. She refused to give her name until the labor became dangerous. Then she showed me a locket bearing the Blackmere crest. Who was the father?" She said it was Lord Adrian Blackmere. Eleanor stared at her. Adrian had been Cedric's younger brother. He had died in a riding accident 8 years ago, unmarried and supposedly childless. If Adrian had a son, Eleanor said slowly, the child might possess a claim to family property settled through the male line. "Not the dukedom," Mrs. Wren replied, But perhaps the northern lands and their mining rights. I know little of such law. I only know Lady Viola witnessed the birth. Viola had married Adrian's closest friend 6 months after his death. Her son Julian was 8 years old. The age matched. Was Viola the mother? I never saw the woman's face clearly. She wore a veil even after the child was born. Lady Viola gave me 20 sovereigns and ordered me to record the infant under another surname. I refused. The next morning, the original page had been replaced. Eleanor turned toward the shattered window. If Julian was Adrian's son, rather than the late Mr. Harcourt's, Viola had concealed his identity for years. But why reveal it now? And why frame Eleanor unless her unborn child stood between Julian and something Viola desperately wanted? Where is the original entry? I copied it before it was stolen. Mrs. Wren touched the bodice of her dress and went pale. The page. I had it when I entered the passage. Mrs. Finch searched the floor and found nothing. A heavy knock sounded at the outer door. "Eleanor?" Cedric called. "Open this door." Mrs. Wren recoiled. I did not tell him. Eleanor gathered the surviving register fragments and pushed them into the hollow behind the fireplace panel. Mrs. Finch guided the midwife toward the passage, but Mrs. Wren stopped. "My cloak," she whispered. It hung beside the window, speckled with glass. There was no time to retrieve it. The door opened before Eleanor could answer. Cedric entered with Captain Ashcombe, commander of the estate guard. Both men carried pistols. Cedric's gaze traveled from Eleanor's bleeding arm to the broken window and finally to the abandoned cloak. "Who was here?" "A gunman." I asked who was in this room. Captain Ashcombe lifted the cloak. "This belongs to Mrs. Wren." Eleanor said nothing. Cedric crossed the room and took her wrist. His anger faltered when he saw the blood soaking her sleeve. "Were you struck? Would it change anything if I had been?" His grip loosened. Captain Ashcombe examined the window. A silver cord decorated the shoulder of his black uniform, but his boots were clean. The shooter stood below. "The tracks lead east. Follow them," Cedric ordered. "Take 4 men." Ashcombe bowed and left. Cedric tore a strip of linen from the cloth covering the washstand and began wrapping Eleanor's arm. His movements were controlled, but his hands were unsteady. "You are confined for your protection," he said. "You dismissed my maid, isolated me from every loyal servant, and placed armed men outside my door. Someone still reached my window. I did not order this. No, you merely made it possible." The accusation struck him. Eleanor saw it before he looked away. Cedric tied the bandage. "Mrs. Wren removed a parish register this evening. The rector reported it stolen. She feared someone had altered it." "Did she tell you that?" "She did, and you believed her without question." Eleanor met his eyes. I listened before condemning her. For a moment, the only sound was the wind moving through broken glass. Cedric picked up Mrs. Wren's cloak. Something fell from its inner seam and landed between them. A folded register page. Eleanor moved first, but Cedric caught it. His expression changed as he read the entry, then the witness signature. "What does it say?" she demanded. He folded the page and placed it inside his coat. "It says Mrs. Wren lied to you." From behind the fireplace came a faint gasp. Cedric's head turned toward the hidden passage. He drew his pistol and reached for the panel. Eleanor stepped between Cedric and the fireplace. His pistol stopped inches from her shoulder. "Move." "No." The single word filled the darkened room. Eleanor could feel Mrs. Finch and Mrs. Wren holding their breath behind the wooden panel. If Cedric opened it, he would find 2 women he had already chosen to regard as thieves and conspirators. Mrs. Wren might be arrested before she could explain what had been altered in the register. Cedric's eyes narrowed. Someone is hiding in that passage. a passage known to half the servants in Blackmere, and used tonight by the woman who stole a parish record. She removed evidence because someone had already tried to replace it. That is what she told you. It is what the torn pages prove. Cedric's gaze shifted toward the fireplace. What pages? Eleanor realized her mistake. She had revealed that part of the register remained in the room. Cedric moved around her. Eleanor caught his sleeve, but he pulled free and pressed the hidden latch. The panel opened to reveal the narrow passage. It was empty. A cold draught carried the smell of damp stone from within. Mrs. Finch had taken Mrs. Wren deeper into the servants' corridors during the argument. Cedric lifted the candle and examined the dust. 2 sets of footprints led away. You helped them escape. I protected a terrified old woman after someone fired into my room. She possesses stolen property. And you possess the page she risked her life to preserve. Cedric touched the inside of his coat. Eleanor studied his face. When he had read the entry, she had seen shock, not disbelief. Whatever the page contained, it had confirmed something he recognized. You said Mrs. Wren lied, Eleanor continued. You did not say the entry was false. His expression closed. Give me the page. No, it concerns the accusation against me. It concerns my family. I am your family. The words escaped before Eleanor could prevent them. Pain flickered across Cedric's face, then vanished beneath the same cold restraint he had worn before the magistrates. Until the parentage of your child is established, that remains in question. Eleanor recoiled, as if he had struck her. Cedric looked at the blood seeping through her bandage. For a moment, he seemed ready to apologize. Instead, he stepped away. Captain Ashcombe will double the guards outside these rooms. At dawn, I will question Mrs. Wren myself. If she survives the night. His head turned sharply. The gunman knew where she was, Eleanor said. The person who forged my letters also knew which inventory to consult. Someone inside this house is directing both. And you believe that person is Viola. I have not named her. You did not need to. Cedric's defense came too quickly. Eleanor remembered Viola's fingers tightening when pennyroyal was mentioned. She remembered the emerald brooch at her throat and the confidence with which she had spoken during the hearing. How long have you known Julian may be Adrian's son? The candle flame trembled between them. Cedric said nothing. That silence answered her. You knew, Eleanor whispered. Perhaps not from the beginning, but you knew before tonight. I suspected, and you allowed Viola to present Julian as her husband's child. Adrian died before he could acknowledge the boy. Exposing the truth would stain Julian with illegitimacy and destroy Viola's reputation. So you protected them. He is an innocent child. So is mine. Cedric flinched. Eleanor stepped closer. Yet you publicly branded my child illegitimate on the strength of letters you refused to investigate. The evidence against you was substantial. The evidence against Viola is now inside your coat. It is not the same. No, Viola had years to earn your loyalty. I had only 6 years of marriage. Cedric looked toward the shattered window, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes. Eleanor understood then that his betrayal had not begun with the accusation. It had begun earlier, in private conversations from which she had been excluded. He had made himself Viola's protector and allowed that obligation to outweigh every truth Eleanor had given him. Why does Julian's birth threaten my child? She asked. It does not. Then why frame me now? I do not know that Viola framed you. But you know what she wants. Cedric's jaw tightened. Before Eleanor could press him, hurried footsteps sounded in the corridor. Captain Ashcombe entered without knocking, accompanied by 2 guards carrying lanterns. We found the shooter's horse near the eastern wall, he said. The animal had been released. There was blood on the saddle, but no rider. "Did you recognize the horse?" Cedric asked. Ashcombe hesitated. "It belonged to the late Lord Adrian." "That is impossible," Eleanor said. "Adrian died 8 years ago." "The horse was retired to the northern farm," Cedric replied. "Only the estate steward could authorize its removal." Ashcombe held out a torn strip of black wool. A silver cord remained attached to it. "This was caught on the eastern gate." Cedric compared it with the cord on the captain's uniform. "Search every senior servant's quarters," he ordered. "No one leaves Blackmere." Eleanor's hand tightened over her abdomen as another wave of pain passed through her. Not the sudden movement of the child this time, but a deep contraction that stole her breath. Mrs. Wren had warned her that fear could bring labor too early. She gripped the table until the pain eased. Cedric noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing." Ashcombe turned toward the door, then paused. "There is something else. The rector was found unconscious beside the parish chest. The original register pages are gone." "Was anything left behind?" Eleanor asked. The captain looked at her strangely. "A bottle from the Blackmere dispensary. It contained pennyroyal and bears your Grace's initials." The accusation settled over the room. Cedric slowly turned toward his wife. Eleanor stared back at him. "You know I did not take it." Before he could answer, a guard rushed into the room. "Your Grace, Lady Viola's son is missing." Cedric moved toward the door. The guard caught his sleeve. There was a message on the boy's bed. He handed Cedric a folded sheet. Eleanor recognized her own handwriting before the Duke opened it. Cedric read the single line aloud. "Admit my child as your heir, or Adrian's son dies before sunrise." Cedric crushed the note in his fist. "Seal the gates," he ordered. "Search the house, the grounds, and every building between here and the northern farm." The guards hurried away. Eleanor reached for the message. "Let me see it. You have seen enough. It was written in my hand. That makes it evidence against me. It threatens an 8-year-old boy, and whoever wrote it wants you too frightened to examine how it was made." Cedric's face hardened. "Julian's life matters more than your theories." Eleanor felt the injustice of those words, but she refused to waste time defending herself. The deep pain in her abdomen had eased. She did not know how long that mercy would last. Where was Julian last seen? "In the nursery," Captain Ashcombe said. "His nurse left him asleep less than an hour ago." "Was the window open?" "No. The door showed no damage." Then he knew the person who took him. Cedric looked toward the captain. "Bring Viola here." Ashcombe left and returned minutes later with Lady Viola supported between two maids. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wore only a white nightdress beneath a velvet robe. The emerald brooch was gone. "My son," she cried. "Cedric, you must find him." He caught her before she collapsed against him. Eleanor watched Viola bury her face against the Duke's chest. There were no tears on her cheeks. Cedric handed her the note. Viola read it, then stared at Eleanor. "You did this. I have been guarded inside these rooms. You have servants loyal to you. That old woman and your maid entered through the passage." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "How did you know they were here?" Viola froze. Cedric slowly released her. "I heard the guards discussing Mrs. Wren's cloak," she said. "Everyone knows she came. No one outside this room knew Mrs. Finch was with her," Eleanor replied. Viola's lips parted, but no answer came. A commotion erupted in the corridor. 2 guards dragged Mrs. Finch into the room. Captain Ashcombe followed with Mrs. Wren, whose face had turned ashen. "We found them near the south staircase," he said. Viola pointed at Mrs. Finch. "Search her." A guard emptied the maid's pockets. He found coins, the tiny brass key, a strip of bandage, and a small wooden horse painted red. Viola screamed. "That belongs to Julian." Mrs. Finch stared at the toy. "I have never seen it before." "You took him," Viola said. "Your mistress ordered you to hide him." Eleanor crossed the room and took the horse before the guards could stop her. Red paint had rubbed onto the maid's pocket lining, yet Mrs. Finch's fingers were clean. The paint was still wet. She lifted the toy to her nose. Beneath the sharp scent of linseed oil lay something sweet and medicinal. "Do not touch your face," she warned Mrs. Finch. Cedric stepped closer. "What is it?" "Poppy tincture mixed into the varnish, enough to make a child drowsy if he held it." Viola's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Eleanor turned to the captain. "Was Julian dressed when he disappeared?" "His nightshirt and slippers were gone. So was his coat. A sleeping child did not dress himself. If he walked willingly with someone, he may have carried this toy until the drug affected him." Cedric looked at Mrs. Finch's pocket. "Then why plant it on her?" "To end the search at the first convenient suspect." Mrs. Wren suddenly gripped the back of a chair. "The northern cottage." Everyone turned toward her. "The woman who gave birth to Adrian's child stayed at a cottage near the northern boundary," she said. "There was a red wooden horse above the door. Lord Adrian carved it himself." Viola went still. Cedric noticed. "You told me Adrian never took you there. I did not know what the cottage looked like." Mrs. Wren stepped toward her. "You stood beside the bed while that child was born. You are confused. I remember your voice." Viola slapped her. The sound cracked through the chamber. Cedric seized Viola's wrist. "Enough." For the first time, genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Eleanor turned to Ashcombe. "Send men to the northern cottage." "The main bridge was damaged by last week's rain," he replied. "The road is impassable for carriages. There is an old shepherd's track through the ash wood." Cedric shook his head. "Not in darkness. It is marked on the medicinal survey I made for the estate. The path avoids the flooded ground. I know the land. You know the hunting roads. I know where the tenants gather herbs." Another contraction tightened around Eleanor's body. She kept her face still until it passed. Cedric saw her hand close over the edge of the table. "You are not going. Then remain here and question Viola while Julian disappears. I will go with Ashcombe. You will lose an hour finding the path." Cedric glanced at the note, then at Eleanor's blood-stained sleeve. His pride fought visibly with fear for the boy. "If you come," he said at last, "you remain beside me." Eleanor looked directly at him. "I stopped obeying your commands when you used them to destroy me. I will help find Julian because he is innocent, not because you have remembered that my knowledge is useful." She took a dark cloak from the wardrobe and turned to Mrs. Wren. "What was beside the cottage?" "A ruined lime kiln and an old medicinal garden." Eleanor paused. Pennyroyal had once grown near abandoned lime kilns because the damp soil suited it. The plant had been removed from Blackmere's dispensary, but perhaps not from the land. Someone had chosen that cottage long before tonight. Captain Ashcombe led them through the silent house. At the lower entrance, a guard waited with several saddled horses. One animal had no rider. Across its leather saddle lay Julian's small blue coat. A dark stain marked the collar. Eleanor touched it, then raised her fingers to the lantern. It was not blood. It was the same green-black residue she had seen beneath the forger's thumbnail, and she finally recognized the substance. "Cedric," she said, looking toward the northern woods. The physician did not flee Blackmere. A distant church bell struck once. "He is holding Julian at the cottage." Cedric reached for Eleanor's reins. "You will ride behind me." "No. If the path narrows, one horse carrying 2 adults will slow us. You are 7 months pregnant, and Julian has been drugged." She pulled the reins free before Cedric could argue. Captain Ashcombe mounted beside them while 4 guards lit torches. The church bell sounded again, each stroke measuring the time remaining until sunrise. They entered the ash wood at a gallop. Branches caught Eleanor's cloak as she guided them away from the flooded hunting road. She had mapped this path 3 summers earlier while searching for feverfew and wild garlic for the infirmary. Cedric had called the work unnecessary then. Now he followed her without question. The track descended between wet limestone walls. Eleanor's horse stumbled, sending another contraction through her body. She bit back a cry and remained upright. Cedric rode closer. "You are in pain. The child is moving. You are lying." "So were the letters, yet you found those easier to believe." He had no answer. Ahead, the trees opened around a ruined lime kiln. The northern cottage stood beyond it, black against the moonlight. A carved red horse swung above the door. No candle burned inside. Eleanor dismounted before the guards reached her. Near the threshold, crushed pennyroyal released its sharp, bitter scent beneath her boots. Captain Ashcombe drew his pistol. "My men will enter first. If Dr. Shaw is watching, the uniforms may provoke him," Eleanor said. "He threatened a child." "We do not know that." Cedric looked at the sealed windows. "You recognize something on Julian's coat. The residue came from green vitriol mixed with gall ink. Dr. Shaw used it to label medicines because ordinary ink faded in the dispensary's damp cabinets. The same ink may have been used to forge your letters," Cedric said. "Yes, but anyone could have taken it from his rooms." Ashcombe signaled to 2 guards. They circled the cottage while Cedric approached the front door. "Julian?" he called. "It is Uncle Cedric." A weak thump answered from within. Cedric struck the door with his shoulder. The frame held. Ashcombe joined him, and together they forced it open. The smell of smoke and laudanum poured into the night. Julian lay beside the hearth, unconscious but breathing. A chair had been wedged against the inner door, and a burning candle stood inside a circle of spilled lamp oil. The flame was less than an inch from reaching it. Eleanor kicked the candle away. Oil ignited across the floor. Cedric lifted Julian while the guards beat at the flames with their cloaks. Eleanor searched the boy's face. His pupils were small, his breathing dangerously shallow. "He has taken too much opium." "Can you save him?" Cedric asked. "If we keep him awake and moving." "Carry him outside." A muffled blow came from beneath the floorboards. Eleanor saw a square iron ring hidden under the table. Ashcombe stepped toward it, but she noticed the soot on his left glove. They had not yet touched the fire. "Captain," she said, "how did your glove become black?" Ashcombe looked down. In that instant, the floor erupted beneath them. A man's shoulder struck the trapdoor, throwing the table aside. Dr. Shaw crawled from the cellar with his hands tied, and blood dried across his face. "Do not let him take the boy," he shouted. Ashcombe raised his pistol. Eleanor struck his wrist with the iron candle holder. The shot tore into the ceiling. Cedric turned as Ashcombe seized Eleanor by the throat and dragged her against his chest. A second pistol appeared in the captain's hand, its barrel pressing beneath her ribs. "Put the child down," Ashcombe ordered. Cedric held Julian tighter. "Release my wife." "Your wife was meant to remain at Blackmere until the fire destroyed the evidence." The guards surrounding them hesitated, uncertain whom to obey. Flames climbed the cottage wall. Eleanor forced herself to breathe against Ashcombe's arm. "You planted the toy on Mrs. Finch. I planted everything where it would be found." The letters, Dr. Shaw wrote them. From the floor, Shaw shook his head desperately. "He threatened my sister." Ashcombe pressed the pistol harder into Eleanor's side. The Duke needed only a little evidence. His pride supplied the rest. Cedric's face went white. "You fired into her room," he said. "I intended to kill the midwife. Your Duchess inconveniently held the register." Why? Because those pages prove Julian is Adrian's son, and Adrian's settlement gives the boy control of the northern mines when he reaches his majority. Eleanor understood. The mines were far more valuable than the failing agricultural estate. Someone wanted Julian recognized, but only after gaining control over him and removing Cedric's legitimate heir. "Viola promised you the mine leases," Eleanor said. Ashcombe laughed. "Lady Viola promises many things." Cedric's eyes flicked toward her, then toward the open door. Eleanor followed his glance. Rainwater dripped from the roof onto the threshold. If she could move Ashcombe one step nearer, the wet stones might unbalance him. She let her knees buckle. Ashcombe tightened his grip, instinctively shifting his weight. Eleanor drove her heel down onto his foot and threw herself sideways. Cedric lunged. The pistol fired. Pain flashed through Eleanor's body, but no bullet struck her. Ashcombe staggered backward onto the wet threshold. Cedric hit him once across the jaw, and the captain fell into the arms of his own guards. "Bind him," Cedric commanded. This time, they obeyed. Dr. Shaw crawled toward Julian. "I can prepare a stimulant, but my case is in the cellar." "I will get it," Eleanor said. Cedric caught her arm. "The roof is burning. Your nephew may stop breathing before we reach the house." She descended through the trap door. Smoke thickened beneath the floor, but she found Shaw's medicine case beside a stack of documents. On top lay several letters bearing her forged signature. Beside them was a sealed contract. Eleanor seized everything. A beam crashed above her. Fire swept across the trapdoor, closing the opening. "Eleanor!" Cedric shouted. She searched the cellar walls and found a narrow coal chute leading toward the ruined kiln. Dragging the medicine case and papers behind her, she crawled through mud until hands pulled her into the cold night. Mrs. Finch stood above her. "How did you come here?" Eleanor gasped. Mrs. Wren remembered another path. Behind the maid waited the two magistrates from Blackmere, accompanied by the parish constable. One magistrate unfolded a warrant. "Eleanor Blackmere," he said, "you are under arrest for the abduction and attempted murder of Julian Harcourt." A sudden warmth spread beneath Eleanor's gown. She looked down as water darkened the fabric. Her child was coming. Cedric tore the warrant from the magistrate's hand. "My wife is not going anywhere." The older magistrate stiffened. "Your Grace, the evidence presented to us was manufactured by the man your constable is presently binding." Ashcombe knelt beside the burning cottage with his hands secured behind him. He watched the exchange without fear. "The warrant bears lawful authority," the magistrate insisted. "And I will answer for obstructing it," Cedric said. "But if you attempt to move her while she is in labor, I will have every man here testify that you endangered both mother and child." Another contraction seized Eleanor before the magistrate could respond. This one drove her to her knees. Mrs. Finch caught her shoulders. "We need shelter." "The lime kiln chamber," Mrs. Wren said. "The inner room has a stone roof. It will not burn." Cedric lifted Eleanor into his arms. She wanted to resist him, but pain had swallowed pride, anger, and speech. She clutched the medicine case and the rescued documents against her chest as he carried her away from the flames. Inside the kiln chamber, Mrs. Wren spread cloaks across a stone bench. Dr. Shaw examined Eleanor, while Mrs. Finch boiled water over a small brazier. "The child is early," Shaw said quietly. "Too early." Eleanor heard the fear he tried to conceal. How long? Perhaps an hour, perhaps less. Outside, Cedric ordered the magistrates to witness the contents of the medicine case. Eleanor could hear paper unfolding and Captain Ashcombe demanding legal counsel. "Cedric," she called. He entered immediately. Eleanor handed him the sealed contract. "Read it in front of them. Do not allow it to disappear into another private family arrangement." He understood the accusation. For years, Cedric had protected Viola's secret because he considered Blackmere honor more important than truth. That secrecy had given others the power to manipulate him. "I will read it publicly," he promised. "Not for me, because it is your duty." His face tightened. "I know. No, you are beginning to know." A cry came from outside. Cedric turned toward the doorway. Ashcombe had broken free. One guard lay unconscious in the mud, and another clutched a bleeding shoulder. Ashcombe mounted the nearest horse and disappeared into the woods before anyone could fire without risking the animal. "He is heading toward Blackmere," Eleanor said. Cedric drew his pistol. "You cannot leave her," Mrs. Finch snapped. Eleanor looked at the documents. The forged letters were there, along with the mine contract, but the original birth entry remained inside Cedric's coat. Ashcombe no longer needed the papers from the cottage. He was returning for someone, or to destroy whatever evidence remained at the house. "Go," Eleanor told Cedric. "I will not abandon you. You already did that in a room filled with magistrates." He closed his eyes, as though the words had cut him. Eleanor gripped his sleeve. "If Ashcombe reaches Blackmere, Mrs. Wren's register fragments, the dispensary inventories, and every household record may be lost. Take the magistrates. Make them witness what you find." Cedric covered her hand with his. "And if the child comes before I return, then Mrs. Wren and Dr. Shaw will do what you refuse to do tonight." "What is that?" "Trust me while I fight for our child." Cedric bent as if he meant to kiss her forehead, then stopped. He had forfeited the right to tenderness, and he knew it. He left without touching her. The next hour fractured into pain, smoke, and Mrs. Wren's steady commands. Eleanor had assisted at difficult births, but knowledge did not diminish terror when the endangered life belonged to her. Dr. Shaw prepared cloths and warmed a small glass bottle. "The child may struggle to breathe. Then you will help him. I will do everything I can. You will do more than that." Eleanor caught his wrist. "You helped forge the letters." Shame bent his head. "Ashcombe threatened to accuse my sister of stealing laudanum. She would have been hanged, and so you placed the rope around my neck instead. I believed the Duke would question you before acting. So did I. That had been the scheme's strongest weapon. Everyone had expected Cedric to behave like the husband Eleanor once knew. Another contraction left no strength for bitterness. Just before dawn, Eleanor gave birth to a tiny boy. He did not cry. Mrs. Wren rubbed his back, while Dr. Shaw cleared his mouth and breathed gently into his lungs. Eleanor lay helpless, listening to the terrible silence. "Please," she whispered. A thin sound finally broke through the chamber. Not a full cry, but life. Mrs. Wren wrapped the infant in warmed linen and placed him against Eleanor's chest. His skin was pale, his breaths shallow and irregular. "My son," she whispered. The child's fingers closed weakly around hers. Hoofbeats approached through the woods. Cedric returned as the first gray light entered the chamber. Mud covered his coat, and blood marked one side of his face. He stopped when he saw the infant. Eleanor turned the child away from him. Cedric did not protest. "Is he alive?" he asked. "For now," Dr. Shaw answered. "He needs warmth and constant watching." Cedric knelt several feet from Eleanor. Ashcombe reached the house before us. He set fire to the estate office. The records? Some were destroyed. Mrs. Finch's brother and 3 tenants saved the dispensary inventories. And Ashcombe? He escaped through the western gate. The magistrate entered behind Cedric, carrying a leather ledger, blackened by smoke. "We found this inside Lady Viola's locked desk," he said. "It records payments to Captain Ashcombe and Dr. Shaw." Shaw stared at the floor. The magistrate opened the ledger. "The first payment was made 6 months ago, the week Lady Viola arrived at Blackmere." Cedric looked toward the doorway. "Where is she?" No one answered. Then Mrs. Wren unfolded the copied birth page Cedric had recovered from her cloak. In daylight, a line of faded writing became visible beneath the official entry. She read it twice before her expression changed. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. "The child born in this cottage was Adrian's son," Mrs. Wren said, "but Lady Viola was not his mother." A woman's scream echoed from the woods. One of the guards ran into the chamber. "We found Lady Viola's carriage at the river," he gasped. "There is blood inside, and the true mother's name has been carved into the door." Cedric rose at once, but Eleanor caught his sleeve. "Do not take every guard to the river." He looked down at her, then at the fragile infant against her chest. "Viola may be injured, or she wants us to believe she is." The guard shook his head. "There was a great deal of blood, Your Grace." "Was the carriage overturned?" "No, Your Grace." "Were there tracks leading toward the water?" "I did not look." "Then you found a scene, not a body." Cedric turned to the magistrates. "One of you will remain with Captain Ashcombe. The other comes with me." Eleanor handed the medicine case to Mrs. Finch. "Take Julian and my son back to Blackmere. Use the covered farm wagon, not a carriage. Dr. Shaw must travel with them." "You cannot mean to go to the river," Cedric said. "I mean to examine what was left there. You have just given birth, and I have also spent 6 years establishing the infirmary that may keep both children alive. I will return with them, but I want the carriage brought to the courtyard under guard. No one cleans it. No one removes a single object." This time, Cedric did not command her. He bowed his head. "It will be done." 3 hours later, Eleanor lay in her former sitting room with her newborn son beside the fire. Dr. Shaw had constructed a warming cradle from 2 copper bottles wrapped in wool. The child's breathing remained shallow, but steady. Julian slept in the adjoining room under Mrs. Wren's care. Eleanor should have rested. Instead, she examined the items recovered from Viola's carriage. The word carved into the door was Clara. Clara Vale had been Viola's younger sister. According to the family, she had died of a fever in France shortly before Julian's birth. Mrs. Wren stared at the name. Clara was the woman in the cottage. "You said her face was veiled, but her hands were not. Lady Clara lost the tip of one finger in childhood. I saw the same injury on the woman I delivered." Eleanor opened Viola's abandoned traveling case. It contained money, 2 dresses, a loaded pistol, and a packet of letters tied with black ribbon. Every letter had been written by Adrian Blackmere to Clara Vale. In the earliest, Adrian promised marriage. In the last, he warned her that someone had discovered the pregnancy and that his planned ride must appear accidental if he failed to return. Cedric read the letter twice. "My brother believed someone meant to kill him, and 3 days later he died when his saddle strap broke," Eleanor said. Cedric's face drained of color. Ashcombe inspected that saddle. A cry came from the adjoining room. Julian had awakened. The boy recoiled when Cedric entered, then reached for Eleanor instead. "I did what Mama told me," he whispered. Cedric stopped beside the bed. "What did she tell you?" "To take the red horse and follow Captain Ashcombe. She said it was a game." Eleanor sat beside him. "Did your mother go with you?" "No. She said she would meet us after Uncle Cedric promised I could have the mines." Cedric closed his eyes. "Did Captain Ashcombe hurt you?" Eleanor asked. Julian shook his head. "He gave me sweet medicine. Then Dr. Shaw tried to take me home, so the captain tied him downstairs. That explained Shaw's imprisonment, but not the fire." "Who lit the candle near the oil?" Julian looked toward the doorway. "Mother did." Viola had visited the cottage after Julian was drugged. She had prepared the fire herself, willing to risk the boy she claimed to love if his rescue could be blamed on Eleanor. Cedric left the room without speaking. Eleanor found him in the corridor, one hand braced against the wall. "I brought her into our home," he said. "I gave Ashcombe authority over every guard. I dismissed your warnings as jealousy. You did more than make poor appointments." He raised his eyes. "You chose secrecy over justice when you learned Julian might be Adrian's son. You chose pride over investigation when the letters appeared. And when I showed you the first mistake, you still chose to punish me. I know. Knowing is not repair, no." His voice broke. "But I will begin." He summoned the household, the magistrates, the rector, and every servant who had witnessed Eleanor's accusation. In the same library where he had ordered her to confess, Cedric declared that the letters were forged, the kidnapping charge false, and their newborn son legitimate. Then he removed his ducal signet and placed it before Eleanor. "Until this matter is resolved, no command concerning you, the children, or the infirmary will be issued without your consent." Eleanor looked at the ring, but did not touch it. "You cannot return my authority as though it remained yours to bestow." Cedric lowered his head. "Then tell me what must be done. Restore Mrs. Finch's position and wages. Place the estate guards under the magistrates. Transfer the dispensary accounts to independent trustees. Write the correction in your own hand and send it to every person who received the accusation. I will. And Julian remains under Mrs. Wren's protection. Not yours, not mine. He has been used enough." Cedric agreed to every condition. The household dispersed as evening fell. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to sleep beside her son. A sharp medicinal odor awakened her after midnight. The warming cradle was empty. On the pillow lay the red wooden horse. Eleanor ran into the corridor and found one guard unconscious beside the nursery door. The window stood open, its curtain lifting in the wind. Below, a woman in a dark cloak crossed the courtyard, carrying Eleanor's child. "Viola!" Eleanor screamed. The woman looked up. It was Mrs. Finch. "Stop her!" Cedric shouted from the gallery. Mrs. Finch ran toward the stable yard without looking back. Eleanor gripped the window frame, fighting dizziness as she searched for a way downstairs. Then she saw the smoke. A thin green haze curled from the nursery window beneath her own. Mrs. Finch had not taken the child. She had carried him away from poison. "Do not stop her," Eleanor cried. "Clear the courtyard." Cedric appeared below with 2 magistrates and several guards. He reached Mrs. Finch as she stumbled beside the fountain. "The warming bottles cracked," the maid gasped. Someone poured something over the coals. The room filled with fumes. Dr. Shaw pushed through the courtyard doors. He took the infant from her and smelled the blanket. "Burning pennyroyal mixed with opium," he said, "enough to weaken his breathing." Eleanor found the back staircase and descended, one hand gripping the rail. Her body protested every step, but she continued until Cedric saw her and ran to meet her. "You should be in bed. My son should have been safe there." Cedric stopped. They had doubled the guards. They had placed witnesses in the house. Yet the same authority Cedric had given Ashcombe still opened every gate, servants' passage, and locked room in Blackmere. Dr. Shaw listened to the infant's chest. "His breathing is faint but regular. He needs clean air." Mrs. Finch pointed toward the unconscious guard. "That is not Mr. Bell." A guard removed the man's hat. Beneath it was the face of a former stableman, dismissed 2 years earlier for theft. "He wore Bell's uniform," Mrs. Finch said. "I realized it when he called the Duchess Lady Eleanor. Mr. Bell has always called her Your Grace." Cedric ordered the impostor bound. Eleanor knelt beside him and examined his hands. Green-black ink stained 2 fingers. A shallow cut marked his thumb, and wax remained beneath 1 nail. "This man copied the warning found on Julian's bed," she said, "but he did not compose it." "How can you know?" the younger magistrate asked. "The forged letters used my older handwriting, copied from infirmary accounts. The warning imitated the hand I use now. 2 different models. Someone supplied him with recent writing." Mrs. Finch went pale. "The note you wrote to Lady Viola yesterday," Eleanor remembered it. She had asked Viola to bring Julian to the infirmary for a winter examination. The note had disappeared from Viola's sitting room. The impostor laughed weakly. "You still cannot prove who gave it to me." "No," Eleanor said, "but you can." She lifted the red horse from the nursery floor with a cloth. The varnish contained poppy tincture. Julian carried it to the cottage, yet it appeared beside my child tonight. Only someone who entered the cottage after Julian was taken could have recovered it. Cedric looked toward the prisoner. "Ashcombe gave it to you." The man's smile faded. A pistol fired from the stable roof. Stone exploded beside Eleanor's head. Cedric threw himself over her as the guards scattered for cover. A second shot struck the fountain. Dr. Shaw carried the infant into the archway while Mrs. Finch crawled after him. A dark figure moved along the roofline. Ashcombe. He jumped onto a hay cart and disappeared inside the western stable. Cedric drew his pistol. "Surround the building." "No," Eleanor said. "He wants every guard focused on him." "Why?" She looked toward the east wing. Julian stood at an upper window. Behind him, Lady Viola raised a knife to his throat. Cedric saw them at the same moment. "Viola!" The boy vanished from view. Cedric ran toward the house, but Eleanor caught his arm. "She will kill him if you rush the room." "That is her son. He is Clara's son. And Julian told us she was willing to burn him alive." Cedric's horror gave way to control. "What do you suggest?" "The east wing has 1 public staircase, 1 servant's passage, and a dumbwaiter leading from the old schoolroom to the kitchens. The shaft is too small for an adult, but not for Julian." Eleanor turned to Mrs. Finch. "Go through the kitchen, raise the empty dumbwaiter to the schoolroom, and ring its bell twice." "What if Viola hears it?" "She will." Cedric understood. "You want her watching the shaft. I want her looking away from the door." They entered the east wing without guards. Eleanor walked first, unarmed, while Cedric remained out of sight below the staircase. "Viola," she called. "I have the birth page." The schoolroom door opened. Viola stood behind Julian, one arm across his chest and the knife beneath his chin. Her robe was torn, and dried animal blood stained its hem. "You should be dead," she said. "So should my child. Your child destroyed everything." Before you conceived, Cedric intended to recognize Julian privately and settle the northern lands upon him. Eleanor glanced at the boy. He was trembling but alert. "You forged the letters to make my son illegitimate." "I gave Cedric what he already feared." "No, you gave him permission to be cruel." The dumbwaiter bell rang twice. Viola's eyes shifted toward the wall. Eleanor moved. She seized Viola's knife wrist while Julian dropped to the floor. Cedric rushed through the doorway and pulled the boy away. Viola struck Eleanor across the face, but Eleanor twisted until the knife fell. Mrs. Finch opened the dumbwaiter hatch, and 2 guards entered from the servants' passage. They restrained Viola. A shot sounded from the courtyard. Ashcombe's voice rose from below. "Release her, or I burn the only proof of who killed Lord Adrian." Through the window, Eleanor saw him standing beside a barrel of lamp oil. In one hand he held Adrian's final letter. In the other burned a torch. Viola began to laugh. "He will destroy it," she said. "And when he does, you will never prove which of us cut Adrian's saddle." Eleanor looked at the letter, then at the black ribbon around the packet on her desk. Adrian's correspondence had contained 12 letters. Ashcombe was holding a 13th. "That is not the only proof," Eleanor said. She turned to Cedric. "Bring everyone to the great hall. It is time for Lady Viola to hear what her sister hid in the first 12. The great hall filled before sunrise. Servants stood beside tenants, magistrates, the parish rector, and the constables summoned from the neighboring district. Lady Viola sat between two guards at the long dining table. Julian remained with Mrs. Wren in a private chamber, far from the woman he had called his mother. Captain Ashcombe stood in the courtyard beyond the open doors, still holding the torch above the oil barrel. "Release Lady Viola," he called, "and I surrender the letter." Eleanor entered carrying Clara's 12 surviving letters. Her premature son rested safely in the infirmary with Dr. Shaw and Mrs. Finch. Leaving him had required more strength than crossing the burning cottage, but Eleanor would not allow another private negotiation to bury the truth. "You may burn your letter," she told Ashcombe. A murmur passed through the hall. Cedric stood several steps behind her, unarmed. He had wanted guards at her side. Eleanor had refused. This reckoning belonged to her evidence, not his protection. Ashcombe lowered the torch slightly. "You do not know what it contains. A confession allegedly written by Clara Vale before Adrian's death." His expression changed. "You intended us to believe you stole it from Viola's carriage," Eleanor continued. "But the paper is too white, and the seal bears no smoke damage. You wrote it after escaping the cottage." Viola turned toward the courtyard. "Fool." Ashcombe's face hardened. "You cannot prove that." Eleanor arranged Clara's letters across the table in the order of their dates. Clara feared her correspondence would be intercepted. She knew Adrian had promised to meet her at the northern cottage, yet someone learned of every plan they made. So she concealed her warning in language that would appear ordinary to anyone unfamiliar with medicinal plants. Eleanor pointed to an unusual capital letter in the first letter, Vervain, then the next, Iris. The third contained an oddly capitalized word beginning with O. Across 12 letters, the first botanical reference spelled a message, Viola cut rain. The hall fell silent. Viola's face lost all color. "She knew," Eleanor said. "Clara knew her sister had tampered with Adrian's saddle." "That is absurd," Viola replied. A frightened girl noticed capital letters and imagined a message. The capitalizations appear only in the copies Clara retained. Adrian's letters quote the same passages without them. Mrs. Wren found Clara's copies hidden beneath the northern cottage floor 8 years ago. Mrs. Wren stepped forward. "I kept them because Lady Clara died 3 weeks after giving birth. She begged me to protect her son." Eleanor placed a second document beside the letters. "This is the account book saved from the estate fire. It records a payment made to Captain Ashcombe 2 days before Adrian's fatal ride. The payment was approved under Viola's married name, but dated months before her marriage. The older magistrate examined the entry. The date has been altered." "Yes," Eleanor said. "The upper number was scraped away, but green vitriol in the original ink stained the paper fibers. I restored it with diluted gall solution." Her knowledge had once been dismissed as charitable amusement. Now it exposed the crime hidden beneath a noble family's silence. Cedric looked at Viola. "Why did you kill him?" Viola's composure shattered. "Because Adrian chose Clara." The words echoed through the hall. "He courted me first," she continued. "He promised I would become Lady Adrian Blackmere. Then she returned from France, and he looked through me as though I were a servant. Clara took the man, the family, and the future that should have been mine." "So you broke his saddle strap," Eleanor said. "I weakened it." Ashcombe ensured it failed on the cliff road. Every face turned toward the courtyard. Ashcombe threw the torch. Cedric moved first. He kicked the oil barrel aside while two guards smothered the flame beneath their coats. Ashcombe ran for the stable arch, but the tenants blocked his path. The blacksmith struck the pistol from his hand. The men Ashcombe had commanded for years watched as the constable bound him. Viola laughed again, but there was no triumph in it now. "You think I acted alone?" Eleanor looked toward Dr. Shaw. The physician stepped forward. "Captain Ashcombe forced me to copy the Duchess's hand, but Lady Viola supplied the letters, the old dispensary inventory, and the statement claiming the Duke could not father a child." "Was that statement false?" the magistrate asked. "Entirely false." "Why pennyroyal?" Eleanor asked. Shaw's shame deepened. Lady Viola chose it because the word appeared in an old inventory. She ordered the bottle planted at the church and later burned the herb beneath the child's cradle. She intended the infant's death to resemble weakness caused by premature birth. Cedric gripped the edge of the table. Eleanor continued, before his anger could take control of the room. "And the mine contract?" The magistrate broke its seal and read the terms aloud. Upon Julian's recognition as Adrian's son, Viola would become trustee of the northern lands. She had promised Ashcombe 1/3 of the mining income in exchange for removing every competing claimant. Julian had never been the beneficiary of her plan. He had been its instrument. The magistrates formally charged Viola with conspiracy, forgery, kidnapping, attempted murder, and involvement in Adrian Blackmere's death. Ashcombe faced the same charges. Dr. Shaw surrendered himself for forgery and unlawful administration of drugs, offering full testimony in exchange for mercy toward his sister. The constables led Ashcombe into the hall. As Viola was pulled to her feet, she turned toward Cedric. "Do not stand there pretending innocence," she said. "Tell them what you did when Adrian warned you about me." Cedric froze. Eleanor looked at him. "What does she mean?" Viola smiled through her tears. 2 days before he died, Adrian told Cedric that I had threatened Clara. He asked his brother to cancel the ride and investigate the saddle. Eleanor felt the room change around them. Cedric's silence confirmed it. "I thought Adrian wished to escape responsibility for Clara's pregnancy," he said at last. "He had always been impulsive. I told him to keep the engagement and settle the scandal afterward." "You knew he feared Viola," Eleanor said. "I did not believe him." Viola leaned closer as the constables restrained her. "He did the same thing to his brother that he later did to you. He heard the warning and chose his pride." No one spoke. Cedric walked to the center of the hall. Before the servants, tenants, magistrates, and the wife he had publicly condemned, he removed the Blackmere signet from his hand. "She is right," he said. Then he turned to Eleanor. "I accused you before witnesses. I will name every wrong before those same witnesses and accept whatever consequence you choose." Eleanor looked at the chair from which he had ordered her confession. "No," she said. "You will accept the consequences I do not need your permission to choose." She placed a legal document on the table. It was a petition for formal separation. Cedric looked down at the petition for separation. No one in the great hall moved. The document did not end their marriage. English law offered Eleanor no simple freedom from a living husband, but the deed would establish separate residences, secure her personal income, place their son under her daily care, and prevent Cedric from controlling her correspondence, medical work, or movements. It would give her something his title had nearly taken from her: legal room to live without his permission. Cedric read every clause. Then he signed. He did not bargain for forgiveness or request a private conversation. He called the 2 magistrates forward as witnesses and pressed his seal into the wax. "I accused my lawful wife of adultery without examining the evidence," he declared. I threatened her with imprisonment, denied my unborn child, dismissed her loyal servant, and gave authority to those who endangered her. Lady Viola and Captain Ashcombe created the conspiracy, but my choices allowed it to succeed. Eleanor watched the people who had witnessed her humiliation. Some lowered their eyes, others looked directly at Cedric as he continued. When Eleanor identified the false reference to Pennyroyal, I could have delayed judgment and investigated. I did not. When she warned me that the household had been compromised, I defended my pride. When she asked me to trust 6 years of marriage against forged paper, I chose the paper. He placed the confession he had ordered Eleanor to sign upon the table. Before everyone present, he tore it in half. The accusation is false. Our son is mine, and Eleanor Blackmere acted with courage while I acted with cowardice. The correction was copied and sent to every guest, magistrate, relative, and official who had received notice of Eleanor's supposed adultery. Cedric also surrendered the household correspondence relating to the case, so no later heir could hide what had occurred. The northern lands were placed in trust for Julian. Eleanor, Mrs. Wren, and an independent solicitor became its guardians until the boy reached adulthood. Viola would never control a single shilling of Clara's son's inheritance. Julian chose to remain at Blackmere for the winter, but not in Cedric's household. He lived near the infirmary under Mrs. Wren's care, where he could visit Eleanor and his infant cousin without being treated as an heir to be traded. The trials began 4 months later. Clara's coded letters, Mrs. Wren's testimony, the altered payment record, and the surviving saddle account proved that Viola and Ashcombe had arranged Adrian's death. Their later crimes, the forged correspondence, Julian's abduction, the cottage fire, and the attempt to poison Eleanor's premature child, removed any remaining doubt about their methods. Captain Ashcombe was convicted of murder, kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Lady Viola was convicted as the architect of the plot and permanently stripped of access to Julian or the Vale family settlements. Both received severe sentences under the law. Dr. Shaw pleaded guilty to forgery and helping administer the drugs used against Julian. His testimony spared him the harshest penalty, but he lost his medical position and license. Eleanor refused to excuse his conduct merely because fear had influenced it. He had known an innocent woman would bear the danger he avoided. Mrs. Finch received her unpaid wages, a lifetime pension, and the public restoration of her reputation. The dismissed stable workers and servants harmed under Ashcombe's command were compensated from Cedric's private income. The infirmary no longer belonged to Blackmere House. Cedric transferred the building, its surrounding land, and a permanent annual income to an independent charitable trust directed by Eleanor. He also conveyed to her a small estate called Rosehaven, inherited from his mother, and located 12 miles from Blackmere. It became her home. Eleanor's son survived. She named him Thomas, not Adrian, not Cedric, and not after any man whose legacy carried a demand. By spring, he had grown strong enough to cry whenever Mrs. Finch attempted to put him down, and quiet enough to sleep against Eleanor's shoulder while she reviewed infirmary accounts. Cedric visited only when invited. He never entered Rosehaven without sending notice. He did not carry the ducal signet during those visits, and he never asked Eleanor when she would return. Instead, he performed the work she had required. He opened Adrian's death records to public examination. He funded Clara's grave and placed her name upon it as Julian's mother. He resigned as Julian's trustee and acknowledged that his silence had exposed the boy to years of manipulation. When tenants questioned Eleanor's authority, Cedric corrected them without claiming credit for granting it. When society repeated the old accusation, he answered it himself. Every public lie was met with a public truth. Remorse changed him, but it did not erase what he had done. A year after the night of the forged confession, Cedric came to Rosehaven, carrying no flowers and offering no promises. Eleanor received him in her study. Thomas slept in a cradle near the window, while Julian worked through a book of Latin exercises beside the fire. Cedric placed a final document on her desk. It relinquished every claim he might have used to interfere with Thomas's residence or Eleanor's control of Rosehaven. Their son would retain his name and inheritance, but Eleanor would determine how he was raised. "You could have contested the separation," she said. "Yes." "You could have used Thomas to force my return." "Yes." "But you did not." "No." Cedric looked at the child, then back at her. "I loved you," he said. "But when love required trust, courage, and humility, I chose none of them. I will not call my regret a reason you should risk yourself again." Eleanor studied the man she had once trusted more than anyone in England. "Do you expect forgiveness? I hope one day you will no longer suffer because of me." "That is not the same thing." For the first time, he understood. Eleanor signed the document. She did not promise reconciliation, nor did she declare it impossible. Her future would not be decided by his remorse or by the expectations attached to his title. It would be decided by her. Cedric rose to leave. At the doorway, Thomas awakened and began to cry. Cedric stopped, but did not approach the cradle without permission. Eleanor lifted her son into her arms. "You may say good night to him," she said. Cedric returned, touched one finger gently to the child's hand, and withdrew when Eleanor stepped back. After he left, Eleanor carried Thomas to the window. Beyond the gardens, lamps glowed inside the new women's ward at Rosehaven Infirmary. Mrs. Finch crossed the courtyard with Julian beside her, while patients waited beneath the carved sign bearing Eleanor's name. A year earlier, Cedric had placed a false confession before her and demanded that she surrender her child's name. Now the confession was gone, her son was safe, and the hand holding the household keys was her own. Eleanor closed the door of Rosehaven and turned the key.